Coming up in today's newscast, 8 Israeli teenage girls take Instagram by storm with their new account from the Gaza border. The results of municipal elections across the nation are in, and the slogan for the 2019 Eurovision Song Contest in Tel Aviv is revealed. Eight Israeli teenage girls living on the border of Gaza are now documenting the destruction in their area on an Instagram page that has since gained over 50,000 followers in just 2 weeks. The Instagram page is called OTF Gaza, and it was created to reveal the daily traumas that Israelis in the border communities experience. These teens live just a kilometer away from the separation fence, and like all the others in the communities in the area, they're struggling daily with the ongoing violence being exported from the Gaza Strip. On the OTF Gaza account, not all the photos belong to the girls, as some photos are sent to the account from other subscribers in the area. But there are videos of Iron Dome interceptions in the sky and red alert sirens waking up families from their sleep. And of course, there are also photos of massive burning fields as a result of incendiary terror kites and balloons. One image even shows a little girl clutching her stuffed animal while standing in a burning field. Just over the past weekend, the teens shared a video of sirens and sounds of rockets being fired and intercepted that went on for 12 hours, too. There's also a picture of a firefighter battling the flames and a message thanking him below the picture, reading, quote, "We wanted to say thank you. You're doing hard work, and it's not taken for granted," end quote. Now, since launching the account, they've also been receiving support from many celebrities, and their goal is not political, but rather to raise awareness and bring about change. Israel's municipal elections were held yesterday, and breaking with previous years, many East Jerusalem Muslim Palestinian Israelis decided not to boycott the vote. Many Arab Israelis in the area, along with many Druze in the Golan, did still boycott and protest, but the slow change in attitude has led some analysts to question the true loyalties within the Palestinian population, i.e., would they really be happier under a Palestinian government than under Israel? Here for more is the director of the Center for Near East Policy and a youth advocate and social worker, David Bedain. David, thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so my first question is, what does this symbolize, do you think? Is there a change in attitude, or is it maybe just people finally figuring out that if they want a real change, they need to vote?
Over the last 5 years, the Center for Near East Policy Research has been interviewing Palestinian youth in Jerusalem about what their fears are, what their ambitions are, where they want to go. We get one answer. We want all of Jerusalem, all of Al-Quds. We want the Arab villages that used to be in Jerusalem to be in our hands. Katamel and Deir Yassin, this is what they want, and we'll settle over nothing else. And their loyalty to Jerusalem it stems back to their Arab nationalism, and that is what's determinant. The Palestinian Authority now has an education system which emphasizes the values of not only right of return, but taking back everything in Jerusalem that used to be Arab to go back to them. And every kid from age 5 up talks about their right to go back to the Arab neighborhoods that used to be in Baqa and Talbiya and, as I mentioned, Deir Yassin, etc. And this is what they're talking about all the time.
And they believe that that the Palestinian Authority would be the best option to achieve this.
Absolutely.
Or rather, would they maybe want I don't know, an independent international city? Would they be okay with that? Because that's been suggested.
They talk
by
about one thing and one thing only. It's a very clear, one-minded education, which is to go back to where they came from in 48. And when they talk about Arab neighborhoods, they're not talking about where Gilo is or where Ramot is. They're talking about pristine Jewish communities in Jerusalem, Baqa, Talbiya.
So are you suggesting perhaps that the reason they're voting is not necessarily to become more involved in Israel's democratic or political system, but rather to advance that ideology?
This is the precise strategy. They want to get involved, but not for the good reasons that we in Israel seem to think, but they have another agenda, which is dictated by the Palestinian Authority, that they take back everything they lost in 1948. And that's what they talk about all the time in their schools. They have precise addresses, neighborhoods where their grandparents came from, and that's where they want to go back to by force of arms.
All right, David Bedain, thank you for coming in and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
All right, so speaking of voting, the final ballots in Israel's municipal elections were cast at 10 p.m. last night, ending several tight races across the country. And according to the Interior Ministry, 3.6 million people out of the 6.6 million eligible voters came out to the polling stations across 251 cities, towns, and local councils. Now, while that's still a fairly low turnout, it's actually a 5% increase from the last municipal elections in 2013. But yeah, still pretty sad considering this was also the first year that nearly all Israelis were given the day off just to go vote.
As for the results, some of the races were especially close. The Haifa mayoral candidate Einat Kalish Rotem, now the first female mayor of Haifa, beat incumbent Yona Yachav. Then in Tel Aviv, incumbent Mayor Ron Huldai won again with 45% of the votes, beating out his longtime deputy Asaf Zamir, who received just 35%. Huldai will now be in his 5th term. Yet the most highly contested race was for Jerusalem's mayor. In fact, it's not over, as city councilmen Moshe Leon and Ofer Berkovich will have to face another battle on November 13th. Neither candidate received the necessary 40% or higher of the vote to avoid a runoff election. In related news, violence, protests, and arrests were prevalent in some parts of the country, including in several Druze communities in the Golan Heights. Many Druze who have connections to Syria were concerned that the vote would assist Israel in its control over the region. A few hundred protesters in the Majd al-Shams village also carried Syrian flags and blocked polling centers as police attempted to maintain the peace. And in another Druze village of Yarka, 2 polling stations were also closed after someone shot a stun grenade, wounding 10 people. Finally, in the southern Negev, voting was paused when it was discovered that fake ballots were issued.
As many are reporting now, the tragic massacre at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh was hardly an isolated event. Anti-Semitism has been on the rise, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And ILTV's correspondent Yael Shir joins us with more.
Thanks, Aaron. Yes, according to FBI data, although Jews make up just 2% of the U.S. population, they actually account for over half of the Americans targeted by hate crimes due to anti-Semitism. Wow. And like you said, anti-Semitic acts have been on the rise for years. In fact, 15 years ago, the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, which is an international Jewish organization that fights anti-Semitism, issued a lengthy guidebook called Protecting Your Jewish Institution: Security Strategies for Today's Dangerous World. So clearly, combating the rise in violence due to anti-Semitism has been an ongoing battle for many years. And just based on another study in 2014 on attitudes towards Jews in over 100 countries, the ADL reported there are approximately 1.09 billion people in the world who harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. And that brings us to the massacre in Pittsburgh, which is considered the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history.
So, all right, so the big question is what's being done? Because they're pretty identifiable sources, right?
Well, we know social media plays a huge role. Many violent offenders gain massive followings on social media sites, and then these forums become easy gateways to spreading hatred in viral settings. Twitter and Facebook, for example, have often facilitated the creation of new virtual anti-Semitic communities.
Okay, so again, how can or is this being addressed without violating free speech, for example?
Well, education is the key, and it's easier to prevent hate from developing than to address it after it begins. Israel's official Holocaust Memorial Museum, Yad Vashem, has put together a free online 6-week course called Anti-Semitism from its Origins to the Present. It explores 2,000 years of anti-Semitism, and it aims to answer a lot of questions about its evolution. The course has video lectures presented by 50 leading researchers, historians, sociologists, philosophers, religious leaders, and political scientists from around the world. They discuss the nature of hate, anti-Semitism in the Middle Ages, Nazi ideology, and ways that anti-Semitism is dealt with today. It also explores current events that are related to anti-Semitism, which is really important, such as the BDS movement, the alt-right in the U.S., and the British Labour Party. So hopefully we'll be able to combat this epidemic, or at least gain the knowledge to be empowered on the subject.
All right, well, there's no arguing here, and thank you for telling us about the Yad Vashem course. It actually sounds amazing. I personally am going to go home and sign up. We can maybe study and compare notes.
Definitely.
Thanks for your report, Yael.
Thanks, Aaron.
In other news, Colombian authorities have now filed an indictment against Israeli citizen Roy Erez and Colombian national Hugo Camacho Bustamante. And the 2 defendants have reportedly been sitting in San Andres prison since their arrest in August for charges of attempting to traffic over 230 kilos of cocaine from Panama to Jamaica.
The 39-year-old Erez was apparently in the midst of a sailing trip around the world at the time of his arrest, but nothing about the indictment seems simple. Erez's sister, Karine Erez Azulay, has been in contact with her brother and Israeli authorities and explains that her brother is innocent. In a Facebook post on her wall, Azulay detailed the case, saying that her brother had been in Panama visiting a local Chabad house as part of his world sailing trip. At the Chabad house, Erez allegedly took on 2 other Israeli passengers, dropping them back off in Panama 3 days later. Afterwards, Erez set sail for Jamaica by himself, but somewhere at sea, in open waters, a group of pirates supposedly operating a fishing boat intercepted Erez and forced him at gunpoint to take on a new passenger, Bustamente, who Erez did not know. It was just a few hours later that Erez and Bustamente were intercepted once again in international waters, this time by Colombian authorities. Upon later searches, Colombian officials say they found nearly 515 pounds or 234 kilos of cocaine aboard Erez's sailboat. Still, despite Erez's understandable fears, his lawyer, Mordechai Tzibin, has shown confidence both in his client's innocence and in the Colombian judicial system to make the right call. He said, quote, "In my experience, I have full confidence in the Colombian judicial system and the human rights situation in the prisons. My client is a positive person with values, and I believe that the court will find that he was deceived by criminal elements," end quote.
In other news, it looks like the ties between Israel and Guatemala are growing ever stronger. Just a few months after Guatemala moved its embassy to Jerusalem following the United States, the two countries started cooperating with each other in many other different ways. And Now TV's Joy Gavijon is here with the details. So, Joy, thanks for being with us. What's
Sure.
new?
Thanks, Aaron. Well, there is a lot of news involving both Guatemala and Israel, but I'm going to start with one that it's very special. Because last week, the ambassador for Israel in Guatemala, Natania Cohen, handed out 270 wheelchairs for kids with special needs. And this happened in a ceremony that was attended by the President of Guatemala, Jimmy Morales, the First Lady, Patricia Morales, and the Foreign Minister, Sandra Jobel. Now, these wheelchairs were donated by the Mashaba Agency, which is Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation. And the actual wheelchairs are made by the Israeli NGO Wheelchairs of Hope, which develops these new chairs that are smaller, they're lighter, and they're more affordable than the traditional ones.
Yeah, no, I actually remember the co-founder of this NGO of Wheelchairs of Hope. He was here with us just last week.
Yes, exactly.
And what they do is amazing, of course.
It is.
It's a very big deal.
For sure, yes. All the leaders expressed their gratitude towards them and towards Israel, and especially President Morales, because he took the stand to remind the audience about the promise they made to support and collaborate with Israel when they moved the embassy a few months ago. And then again, he also thanked Israel for more than 70 years of friendship.
Well, that's very touching. It's very nice.
Yes.
Back to talking about diplomacy and cooperation, though. You know, what's next for them? What's next between Israel and Guatemala?
Well, the Foreign Minister of Guatemala, Sandra Jobel, announced that Prime Minister Netanyahu will visit their country in 2019 and said that they are preparing a draft of a free trade agreement to present to him. We're talking about an agreement that intends to increase the trade between the two nations. And there are also some negotiations to some kind of visa program for temporary workers.
There's a lot to expect for next year.
Yeah.
All right, but Joy, that can't be the last one. You know, I know you.
It's not.
I know you have something in sports because it's sports and it's you. So.
Well, actually, since you ask, only because you ask, I'm going to tell you that on November 15, we're going to have a big soccer game because Guatemala's national soccer team is going to play a friendly against Israel's national team in the Netanya Stadium. So for those who are interested, tickets are already on sale. Go to leon.co.il.
All right, well, we'll definitely have to check it out. Thanks for your report, Joy.
Of course.
Moving now to a more local story. In a tragic event, the entire Attar family of 8 from Psagot was killed Tuesday in a head-on automotive collision on Route 90 near Ein Bokek by the Dead Sea. Investigators claim that an SUV with 3 people drifted into the opposite lane, crashing into the Attar family's minivan.
Shortly after the impact, the minivan ignited, though, and those who were not killed in the collision burned to death in the fire. By the time firefighters extinguished the flaming car, everyone had died. The victims include Yariv Attar, his wife Shoshi, and their 6 children ranging from ages 3 to 12. Yariv was a computer engineer, and Shoshi was a special education teacher at Jerusalem's Keren Or school. As for the driver of the second car, he's been arrested on charges of suspected manslaughter. Immediately after the accident, he stated in his shock, "I killed them. I'm not driving anymore." His lawyers said he was confused after the accident, though, and did not remember exactly what happened. But investigations into whether he was under the influence of drugs or alcohol are still underway, and police now claim that the 52-year-old suspect is not cooperating. He and the other 2 passengers in his car suffered moderate injuries and were taken to Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. But while the Transportation Ministry stated that this crash was the deadliest to ever take place on this road, it's not the first accident in recent history. Just several weeks ago, 2 parents and their 10-month-old infant were killed in a head-on collision with a bus on the same road, and the transportation minister has not taken action to fix the issue or add an additional lane. An authority for the road company said it was, however, in the process of expanding the shoulders and repainting the street border lines.
In a national first, Israel has just appointed Amira Aron to be its first ever female ambassador to Egypt. She and all the other recent appointees must now go through the cabinet for approval, but this would be Israel's second ever woman to be chosen as an ambassador to an Arab nation, following Einat Klein, who served as Israel's ambassador in Jordan.
But Aron has had a prolific career already. She started working for the Foreign Ministry in 1991 and has since served as a member of the Israeli Embassy in Cairo, deputy spokesperson for Israel's Foreign Ministry, and the director of the Foreign Ministry's Department of Communications in the Arab world. Then, between 2015 and 2016, she served as the top diplomatic official at the Israeli Embassy in Turkey, and this during the time when crisis eventually caused both Jerusalem and Ankara to withdraw their respective ambassadors. Aron is, of course, also fluent in Arabic. But while her appointment is making waves, and for good reason, she was just one of 4 women appointed for ambassadorial positions on Tuesday out of 9. Rodika Radian-Gordon was appointed to Madrid, Orly Gil to Riga, Latvia, and Marina Rosenberg to Santiago, Chile.
The global Me Too movement has made major waves and headlines in the last year or so, with people lining up, speaking out, and raising awareness to a problem that's been happening for ages. And now, Israeli TV presenter Daphne Lustig has also said Me Too after 13 years of silence. ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh has a story. Emmanuel.
Yes, Aaron, this is a harder story than the normal ones
yeah,
for me.
Yeah, not the normal culture fashion.
Yes, this is definitely. And also, I am good friends with Daphne, and I spoke to her recently. I told her that we were going to be doing this piece and covering it. For those who don't know, like you said, she's a TV presenter. She has a radio show. She's a fashion icon here in Israel. Everyone knows who Daphne is, and I think that it's so empowering and so brave of her, out of all people, you know, to come out and say something. And it's shocking almost, and I even told her that she's been silent for 14 years. You don't expect that from her.
Yeah.
She went, I mean, you don't expect it from anyone, but a lot of people don't feel comfortable, which is the whole point of the Me Too movement. She came out stating a bunch of different sexual harassment experiences that she had, starting from the 9th grade all the way till when she was 22. And the one that impacted her the most, which the post is about, is when she was 24 years old. She was at a very famous chef's house in Tel Aviv. She doesn't name the chef, and she mentions how she went to his house, they were drinking with a few friends, and that's all she remembers. She remembers waking up at 4 a.m. the following day in her bed, hysterically crying. She went to Ichilov Hospital here in Israel and asked for a rape drug test, which they refused to give her. They said that
they refused her a rape kit.
Yeah, they refused her a rape kit, and she says in the post she still doesn't understand why. They said something about the alcohol in her blood system, things like that. She never got the test. The chef, who's still unnamed, kept calling her, things like that. She ended up telling him not to call her anymore, and that she ended up in the hospital. And he said, basically saying, what's the big deal? Like, you don't go to the hospital just for anything. Very crazy. A week and a half after this incident, a woman that was apparently at the event at the chef's house told her the story, told her what happened. She apparently walked in with the chef to this friend's apartment, sat down on the couch, and this man had just started touching her in front of all of these people. She kept telling him no, and the friends got mad at this man, told him stop touching her, she doesn't want this.
What was her, consciousness?
She doesn't remember this. This woman called her a week later and told her this story, telling her this is what happened, laying all the facts out for her.
No, I mean, I understand she blacked out, but I mean, what was like her reported consciousness level at the time of the incident?
None. She doesn't remember this. She doesn't recall this at all. She says that the woman says that Daphne asked him to stop. He wouldn't, and they later left the house together. There's a lot of women that are so appreciative of Daphne coming out and stating this, and she even says she's still to this day scared to tell people who the name of the chef, and that she knows a lot of people that know this story and still go to his restaurant.
I mean, I can imagine. That's really the basis of Me Too is kind of how to address these situations that involve power difference.
Yeah.
And getting justice in these events.
Yeah, she's been silent for 14 years. She said, and I spoke to her earlier today, and I told her how proud I was and how moving it was for her to come out and say these things. And I hopefully she She has the courage to come out with the name, and if not her, I'm sure plenty of other women will stand up and say me too also. So we're proud of you.
I couldn't have said it better. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, it's hard for me to kind of
100%.
Sometimes get in and say, I don't know, to take ownership, I guess, in a way,
Definitely.
like, to be an ally without taking the spotlight in a sense, as a man.
Of course.
You don't want to.
But I think that I think that's also a very big, issue. A lot of men go through this. A lot of men have Me Too. A lot of men have these feelings, and I think that this is just the first step here in Israel.
But yeah, so her just coming out and being this brave, it's absolutely incredible. Emmanuel, thank you for sharing her story.
Thank you.
All right, the 2019 Tel Aviv Eurovision slogan was revealed this week, and drumroll please, it's going to be Dare to Dream. And it's fitting both in the sense that Netta Barzilai beats all odds in this year's Eurovision, which brings the competition to Tel Aviv in the first place, and also possibly because the song contest was originally planned for Jerusalem next year before being changed after heavy criticism.
A delegation from the Eurovision Broadcasting Union visited Israel and unveiled the slogan Sunday evening alongside Communications Minister Ayub Kara and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And contrary to my jab, the executive supervisor of the Eurovision Song Contest said the slogan is really about inclusion, diversity, and unity. Speaking at the unveiling, Netanyahu, who was there at the Foreign Ministry with his wife Sarah, said he's dreaming of bringing the Eurovision to Israel again in 2020, adding that, quote, "I'm sure all the songs will be excellent, but we dream and we also fulfill our dreams," end quote. Now, if you're wondering why a slogan is such a big deal, it's actually a very important aspect of the event. Traditionally, the host broadcaster chooses the new slogan every year, and it's used as the creative foundation of the content's visual identity, stage design, opening act, interval act, and postcard production. So as for the CEO of the Israel Public Broadcasting Corporation, Kan, he stayed within the spirit of inclusion, saying, "We dare to dream about a wide-scale Eurovision contest that will be accessible to millions of viewers in Israel and abroad. The Eurovision Song Contest is important to Israel and its image. We expect to work in full cooperation with all parties involved."
Now in tech news, the Jerusalem-based Mobileye, which Intel bought for $15.3 billion, is now teaming up with Volkswagen Group and Israel's Champion Motors to launch a self-driving taxi service in Israel as early as 2019. TV's correspondent Dorian Mizrahi has the scoop.
Thanks, Aaron. So the plan is expected to be launched next year, but will actually only be operational by 2022. And everyone is playing an important position in this venture. Volkswagen will provide electric vehicles. Mobileye will outfit them with its Level 4 automotive vehicle kit, which includes hardware, safety software, driving policy, and map-related data. And Champion Motors will operate the control center and fleets themselves. So truly, all three companies are equally collaborating to bring the best services and tools forward.
How's this going among other taxi drivers in Israel, though? Because in the past, they've so far, for example, been successful in lobbying to bar competition like Uber and Lyft.
I remember when Uber wanted to come to Israel, Netanyahu was all for it, and Katz was against it, claiming his job is not to take care of foreign tycoons, but of all Israeli citizens. But in my opinion, that is exactly the opposite when you don't allow companies like Lyft and Uber to operate in Israel and make transportation cheaper for the people. But for this project specifically, the government is in full support, and they're on board, and they're really willing to help.
Well, that is excellent news. Now, we just have to find out what these cars will offer in Israel in actuality, though. Like, if they'll actually make the city safer, cleaner, and accessible, etc. I'm anxious to see the final result.
Me too.
Doleo, thank you for your report.
Thank you, Aaron.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Israel has appointed its first female ambassador to Egypt, so our Hebrew word today will be shagrir, or ambassador. A shagrir, or an ambassador, is a high-ranking diplomat who serves as representative of a country when communicating and dealing with the authorities and organizations of another country. In this case, Amira Oron was assigned as Israel's first female shagrira, or ambassador, to Egypt since the peace treaty was signed between the two countries back in 1979. Now, that is a huge accomplishment. And by the way, if you have an interest in becoming a shagrir, or an ambassador, for your country, you can start by majoring in political science in college and then taking in, political leadership positions and civil service roles in your community. You could be living in your country's shagrirut, or embassy, before you know it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear to partly cloudy and comfortable with a low of 67 or 19 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect sunny skies and a slight rise in temperatures to a high of 88 or 31 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.72 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News. and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.